The Red Bull team is making the most of what is considered their home Grand Prix. Max Verstappen won ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez in the Austrian Grand Prix sprint race. This following their front row scuffle in the early stages of that 24-lap duel. Verstappen is now leading the Drivers' Championship by 70 points. Joining me now to chat about today's main race is MotorZar TV Founder and our regular analyst here on the channel, Lufefe Mayekiso. Lufefe, very good morning. Always a pleasure having you in. I mean, a lot happened between Friday and Saturday that you can almost expect a lot to happen on Sunday. On Friday, we had Charles Leclerc looking good. On Saturday, Charles Leclerc wasn't looking too good anymore. I mean, but let's just talk about how amazing the sprint race was yesterday. And I mean, just your thoughts on the format itself.
Well, if you remember in our last discussion, I was saying that I find this new format of sprint races so exciting. So yesterday even elevated further with the wet weather, where we saw changing conditions, and the skill of the drivers was just something that is in awe of everyone, because they were just absolutely brilliant. The wheel-to-wheel racing right through in those conditions, and it just shows that these are really the top 20 drivers in the world.
Is it skill, or is it a car, or is it both?
Well, it's obviously a combination, because these cars are set up to go fast in that weather, and wearing the intermediate tires, then they're designed to go like that. But if you look at the spray that is in the visors of the drivers when they drive, you can't see anything, but they know exactly where to brake, where to turn, and if the car in front of them brakes early, they're able to take an advantage. So it really is amazing. I was really impressed with what I saw yesterday.
How important is strategy when the weather does what it does, when it serves you up this, and you've got, you know, again, you now relying on your skill and the car itself, but then strategy needs to also be a pinpoint, yeah?
Well, if you saw, George Russell was the first driver to go onto dry tires yesterday, and he gained an enormous advantage. By the end of the race, he was already 4 seconds a lap quicker than even the front runners. So strategy when it comes to changing conditions could be the difference between winning and losing.
What are we expecting today?
Well, apparently there's no rain predicted today, but the weather's very unpredictable in Spielberg. So you never know, but I would say Max Verstappen, obviously, to take the checkered flag, no matter what the conditions is. The way he's driving is just almost unbeatable. So I expect another victory for him in front of his home crowd. And I would say second place, I don't know about the Ferraris. You mentioned them earlier. I mean, they looked off the pace again in the sprint race yesterday, but they were quick over one-lap pace, which is something that we have seen from them in the earlier parts of the season, with Charles Leclerc securing a pole position, the only driver to do so outside of Red Bull. So I don't know if he can finish second, but hopefully he can, because he needs that confidence booster with the up-and-down season that he's had. Then third place, I will give it to Sergio Perez, because the speed of that Red Bull is actually amazing.
But he hasn't been able to get much out of his car for a couple of races now, you know. So how much faith would one actually risk to have in him, given the conditions? I mean, yes, you've applauded the skill, the driving skill of all 20 of them, but with him not showing up on a couple of races with the car he has, how much faith would one risk to put in him?
Well, I mean, this weekend he looks like the Sergio that we saw in the first 4 races. I mean, whatever it is that was holding him back seems to have gone away. He was unlucky not to be next to Max Verstappen in the front row, because he had his lap time deleted for exceeding track limits, which is something all the drivers were suffering with throughout practice and the qualifying sessions.
There are 2 drivers we haven't spoken about who had shown the last couple of races at least that perhaps they could maybe, you know, have Verstappen looking over his shoulders just a little, you know, just out of caution. And that's Fernando Alonso and Sir Lewis Hamilton. I mean, just talk to me about their weekend and if there's anything for them, you know, on offer in today's main race.
Well, the Aston Martin, it's the second race where they seem to be struggling. They seem to be behind Ferrari and Mercedes in terms of raw pace. So I don't know if we're going to see a strong display, but they have had good race pace even when they haven't qualified so great. Lance Stroll is finally coming to the races, so at least now they've got 2 cars to compete with. So that's Aston Martin. I don't know if they can make it up to the podium, but definitely top 5, top 6, both drivers for that matter. And then Mercedes, I mean, Sir Lewis is starting 4th, but George is outside the top 10. Yeah. But George showed very good pace yesterday, back to the George that we know. He, just like Sergio Perez, has been struggling a bit of late, but it's good to see him, you know, making his way up the field again. Yeah. So I would say that behind the top 3, we could have a Lewis Hamilton 4th and Fernando Alonso 5th.
Just before I let you go, briefly, MotorZar usually has watch-alongs, you know, on race days, no matter the time. Even when you guys are, when the race is in Canada, you guys are sitting at watch-alongs, you know, at a particular venue that you guys host at. Are you guys doing anything different, special today? I mean, Red Bull in the ring itself, are you guys doing anything special for today's watch-along?
Well, to be honest, we tried to rope in Red Bull for this particular race, but due to last-minute preparations, we were unable to clinch it. But today would have been our mother's 68th birthday, so my siblings and I are doing a tribute for her at the venue. You'll see the details on our socials.
Now, that is special, man. That is absolutely special. Have a blast with it. I imagine the race is going to be absolutely amazing, and may it be an amazing tribute as well. Lufefe, thank you. It's always a pleasure. Until see you next race day. That is Lufefe Mayekiso, of course, our regular analyst, where we talk Formula One. Of course, today we are previewing the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. Of course, he is the MotorZar TV founder. There is a watch-along, of course, that is going to be happening. So just check out MotorZar TV on all the social platforms to find out where you could go and hang out with the guy.